Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Carter, and I'm a Communities Coordinator here at ASUG. I'd like to welcome you to the ASUG webcast, Experience Amazing Results on Your SAP Project Using Lean and Agile, and thank you for participating today. I do want to apologize about the technical difficulties we've been having. We're going to jump right into our presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Charles Onsei-Bimpong, who will introduce our speaker for today. Charles?
Thank you, Shannon. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Charles Onsei-Bimpong, and I'm the Program Chair for ASUG's SAP Solution Manager SIG. Once again, thank you guys very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend the webcast today from Genesis Consulting titled Experience Amazing Results on Your SAP Project Using Lean and Agile. We're very excited to have our speaker today, Jason Fair, who's the CEO of Genesis Consulting. Jason has over 22 years of industry experience leading SAP software implementations. Started his career as an SAP customer, implemented financials on SAP 2.1H. He's a functional SAP expert, technical development, integration management, and extensive project management experience. In addition, he's also an Agile SAP coach and is a thought leader for Lean Agile SAP, as well as an executive advisor for the past 5 years. Jason is also PMP and CSM certified and a certified SAP consultant, as well as CPA. When he's not working, he enjoys spending time with his 4 kids, skiing, competing in triathlons, and traveling. So without further delay, I'll now hand it off to Jason for today's webcast.
Great. Thanks, Charles. I appreciate being asked to talk on this topic. I'm very passionate about it. Actually, I'm on a client site right now kicking up a whole new project using Lean and Agile, so it's exciting. If we want to go ahead and move on to the next slide. There we go. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and keep going. You can go all the way through to the introduction. Great. As Charles mentioned, I've been doing this SAP thing for a while, so I've been in a lot of your position where I was a customer. My background's in financials and accounting, but then I got into supply chain management, order management, and ended up making a career out of it. And so for the past 20 years, I've been focused on SAP solutions, both on the functional side as well as the technical side, as well as the program management side. I've worked on very large-scale global implementations as well as very small ones. I've worked in the public sector as well as in the commercial sector. And so basically what I've been able to do is over the past 4 or 5 years is be working with clients and trying to figure out how can we start to identify ways for us to accelerate our projects. How can we start to focus on the concepts of Lean? How can we introduce those to our SAP teams? And how can we start to create a better product and deliver in smaller increments to our clients or to our customers? You can go to the next slide. So when I started my company is about 6 years old now. We're an SAP partner. We're focused on SAP solutions. We focus on helping our customers with strategy and planning. We also do advisory services. We do roadmaps, and we do different types of strategy and planning. But we also do Lean and Agile coaching. And so we provide our customers with training. We do Lean blueprinting. We do coaching with regards to Scrum and Agile. And so we help our customers identify how can we best figure out how to introduce these concepts. We do an assessment to figure out where we are on the scale of agility. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then we kind of figure out what's the best approach and what's the best strategy for us to start to introduce these concepts, and how can we implement upcoming projects using the concepts of Lean and Agile. Next slide. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Lean and Agile, I'm going to spend a few minutes here kind of talking about some of the key concepts. We're all familiar with the ASAP methodology. We've all probably been using that and working with our implementation partners and working with SAP to implement the SAP solutions using that approach and that methodology. So traditionally that includes prep, project prep, it includes blueprints, it includes realization, our final preparation activities, and then we go live. We kind of call that linear approach a waterfall approach. When we look at Agile, Agile is about breaking our work up into smaller increments. and we're going to look at all the work we have to do, and we're going to create multiple releases. And we look at those releases, and we break them down into sprints. And what a sprint is, it's a time box that our teams work in that they commit to deliver work to their customers, and they do it in a time period between 2 and 4 weeks. Most projects I've been on are about 3 weeks, and so every 3 weeks the project team will come together and they'll do their work. It might include configuration, it might include development, it might include testing, whatever the team agrees to be doing during that sprint. At the end of the three-week sprint, they focus on delivering that to their customer. And so at the end of the project, all the sprints are completed, we do a release, and that release goes into production. So really what we're looking at is how can we break our work down, how can we look at our work differently, and how can we manage that and deliver that to our customers. So if you go to the next slide, slide 7, when we look at that transition of where we are today and kind of like the ASAP waterfall approach, there's some key events that we use when we go through the sprint process. And so we have a product backlog. That product backlog is basically a list of all the work that has to get done. It is prioritized by the business. It's sequenced in a way that makes sense based on dependencies. We know in SAP there's a lot of dependencies. So if we're working on sales orders, we know that there's some requirements with regards to material master data. There's requirements back to financials. There's requirements back to other areas and other teams. So we have to make sure we identify those dependencies. Then the team decides, I'm going to take the top items, I'm going to put those in my sprint backlog, and then we're going to start to do the work. If we go to slide 8, the premise of all this is based on Lean. So for those of you who are familiar with the concepts of Lean really are about how can we work together as a team, how can we eliminate waste, how can we start to not be micromanaged by a project plan, but how can we have our team be empowered to understand the work they have to get done, and they basically pull the work across the finish line to get it done. And we're constantly pulling work. And that work is based on business value. So we're working on the most important things that are going to add the most value to our business. Our team is empowered to make decisions. They're empowered to configure and design and build the system. And we're always focused on continuous improvement. There's several times during the Scrum cycle that we take a moment to reflect. We talk about how we're doing. We get feedback. We talk about how we can adjust and how we can move forward. And together as a team, we are always in this continuous improvement cycle. So using those concepts of Lean, what we try to do is now introduce some Agile techniques. And Agile is really Lean as it applies to our IT or SAP projects. And so the concepts and the techniques that we really want to make sure we're introducing to our teams are based on that. So we want to make sure we're looking at our work and we're demonstrating it to our customers. We're working in shorter periods of time with time boxes. We want to try to co-locate our teams so they're working together. We want to not be, we've all gotten used to this world of emails and throwing things over the fence between business and IT, writing a spec and then sending it someplace else. We want to have conversations. We want to try to force that conversation between the team members. We need our teams to be self-organized, so we're not going to be micromanaging a 5,000-line project plan. The team knows what needs to get done. They identify the work, and they self-manage and figure out how to get it done. We want to eliminate waste. We really want to focus on customer value add activities. And so when we think about our day and we think about the work that we do every week, how much of that time is really focused on the product or the customer? So if we can start to prioritize our time in a way that eliminates that and it focuses on actually building the product, that's what we want to be able to do. Empirical demonstration of results is when we are going to have our team actually show the stakeholders at the end of the sprint the work that they completed. We want to get that feedback. We want customer involvement. We want it to be in short periods of time. We want the customer to always be present so they can be providing that feedback. And so we force the team to do those demonstrations or the sprint reviews and demonstrate all their work. So there's a lot of planning that goes on. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to discuss the work that's going to be done. How are we doing against the overall project timeline? How are we doing with regards to our capacity of our team members? Is everybody contributing at the right level? So there's a lot of events where we have the opportunity to have that conversation. It's very visible, very transparent. Next slide, please, slide 9. So a lot of people who are familiar with Agile, they're familiar with Agile maybe on the customer application development side, or maybe an e-commerce website, or not necessarily an ERP or an SAP type. So it's a little bit different when we look at SAP, because we're really looking at end-to-end business processes. We're not talking about just delivering a capability or a feature. We're talking about configuration that's integrated between multiple SAP applications. We're not necessarily coding. We're actually making business decisions and configuration decisions. SAP is very complex, as you all know. And so how do we manage that complexity? How do we identify and manage those dependencies that we have? Those are all the things that we have to do very early as part of our project for an Agile SAP project. Also, our teams are made up of people who specialize in very specific areas. How do we start to expand that? How do we get people to be more multifunctional? And also with Agile and an SAP project, what I've found with a lot of projects that we've done is we end up doing all of our Agile sprints, and then we get to a point where we all focus on an integration sprint or sprints. So everybody's working on all of their different pieces of functionality, their business process applications, and then we decide we're all going to converge and go into an integration sprint, and we're going to be doing end-to-end scenarios in an integration sprint. And then we also have to worry about all those other things that we have to do to manage a team. How do we include our basis team, or how do we include the security team? We get change management and training. We have to make sure that they're involved. Some people in some organizations have a separate independent quality assurance team that does testing and participates in testing. How do we get them involved? And so every project's got a little bit of a different challenge. We look at that environment, and we come up with a framework that we can deliver Lean and Agile using SAP. Next slide. So just real quickly to talk about the Agile process. As I mentioned earlier, this is an iterative approach in the way that we deliver work. And so there are some different roles. We have the role of a Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is somebody who helps facilitate the process. They're not necessarily a leader. They're not a project manager. They're somebody who can help listen to the team, help remove obstacles, help with managing each of the events and each of the meetings that we have to have. They're a facilitator. We've also got a product owner. The product owner really represents the business, represents the work that's being delivered by the team. It's the person that can help be a liaison between the team and the business. They can help us prioritize the work that has to get done. They can help us answer questions about design decisions. They're also key in helping resolve issues. If the team's stuck on getting some type of functionality defined, we need to escalate that. The product owner is the one who helps us with that. And then the rest of us are on the team. We're the ones who are doing the work. We're the ones who are going to demonstrate the work. We're building the solution. We're working in SAP. These may be business analysts. These may be subject matter experts. These may be consultants. Everybody becomes part of that team, and we're all working together to deliver the product. The product backlog is our list of things that we're going to get done. It's validated by the business. It represents the functionality and the requirements that we're going to be delivering. We'll be doing that once we have that list and the product owner says, yes, this is our list. As a team, we decide these are the top 10 things that we're going to work on in sprint number 1. The team commits to that, and that's called their sprint backlog. I'm working from left to right here on the picture. Every day we're going to get together and we're going to ask ourselves 3 questions. A 15-minute meeting, and we're going to say, what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And do I have any issues or blockers that are stopping me from getting my work done? Every day our team will meet. We have to force that conversation. Everybody needs to be aware of what everybody's doing. We need to know if our team members need help. We need to know if somebody's falling behind. We need to know if somebody's got extra capacity and can help out. We go through our sprint anywhere between 1 and 4 weeks. We keep looking at our backlog once in a while to make sure as we make changes, we add stuff, we take stuff off. We're getting ready for the next sprint. And then we have our sprint review at the end of the cycle. We invite all of our stakeholders. We invite key decision makers. We invite anybody who we think we need to get input and buy off. We invite our auditors. We want to demonstrate the work that we did. We say we committed to these 10 stories. We show them the 10 stories. We walk them through it, and we get their feedback. We get their blessing. We get their approval. And then we say thank you very much. We'll see you at the end of the next sprint. Then the team breaks off and has a retrospective. In that retrospective, we say, hey, how did we do? Did we work well together? How did we do in the sprint review? Did we get everything approved? What do we have to fix? Are we communicating as a team? Are we understanding the requirements? Does anybody have any questions? Do we have scheduling issues? How are we going to work through all that? So the team reflects on what happened in the last sprint. We figure out what we're going to change, and then we go back and do it all over again. We refine the backlog. We identify the next items for the next sprint, and so on and so on. Next slide, please. Some teams may not necessarily want to go through all of the Agile ceremonies, but we still want to have a transparent and visible way for us to manage the flow of work. And so a lot of teams may use Kanban. It's a lean technique that you may already be using, but we can use this as a way for us to see how our work is getting completed. And so we manage all of the work as a work item. It goes through a process. The numbers that you see at the top of this slide are numbers that are our constraints or our capacity. So we should only, for example, in this scenario in testing, we should only have 2 items in our testing queue, but we've got 4. We've got 1 with an issue on it. So how do we manage that? We're going to have a log jam in our testing. It's going to create a backlog. We need to get somebody over to testing and help them out and clear their backlog. So it's a way for us to manage work. It may not be wrapped around all the Scrum ceremonies, but we're still visible, still transparent. The team is still working together. The team is still managing the flow of work. Okay, you can go into slide 13. What I wanted to do is kind of walk through an example. A lot of people say, hey, Jason, this all sounds great, but I have no idea how we're going to actually make this work on our project. And so I think it's helpful for people to kind of start to visualize some scenarios and how does Agile start to play into what they're working on. And so this is a typical SAP procurement example. It's very high level. It's just for example purposes only. But when we talk about the requisition to check the process, there's a bunch of areas that we have to look at. And so we look at a process from end to end. And so there's master data that we have to worry about. There's vendor data. There's product data. How are we going to manage all of those items? We also have the purchasing steps. And so how do we identify requisitions? How do we approve the requisitions? How do we make sure we have enough funding to support that? Then we've got to source it. Which vendors can provide that? Do we have to get free bids? Do we have contracts that already have those services on them? Do we have to send out an RFP? Then we have to create a purchase order. Then there's the goods receipt. How do we receive the goods? How does it get managed in inventory? We want to have a 3-way match. And then we have to pay the invoice. So we receive the invoice from the vendor. It goes through accounts payable. We process a voucher. And we pay them. High level, simple process. If you go to the next slide then talks about how do we start to look at that work as an Agile decomposition. So now looking at Agile terms, we're looking at things in releases. So if our release is 6 months from now, how do we start to break that down into big chunks of work? The chunks of work then can be broken down into themes and epics, which are just groups of what we call stories, but groups of work that has to get done. An epic might be a process or sub-process area. And then the story represents the actual work that's getting done. What configuration has to be done? What development has to be done? Do we have to do any testing? Do we have to do master data cleansing? Those all become stories. So in this example, in the rec to check process, at the theme level, we've got that's rec to check. The first epic might be, I need to be able to create a service order. And then your story is, I need the ability to create a service order to procure services for less than $10,000. Maybe there's some rules around your procurement on how to procure around $10,000 or greater than $10,000. Once the team decides that's the story they're going to work on in the sprint, they say, hey, you know what, there's probably about 6 or 7 things we have to do in order to do that. And we identify those tasks. And we say, okay, I probably have to make sure I've got the right order types. Maybe I've got some BAPI with some data coming in. Maybe I've got to create 2 additional fields. So I've got to do some extensions or enhancements. I've got 10 tasks. I've got to configure a couple things in SAP and IMG. And those become our tasks. So if you go to the next slide, this is kind of what it breaks down to. The theme is the direct-to-check process, but each of those kind of buckets become our epics. Then each of the individual features become our stories, or those capabilities, or those requirements. So I need to be able to do the work at the story level to be able to do that. If you go to the next slide, we start to introduce the concept of story mapping. And story mapping is really just a visual representation of the work that has to get done. And so from left to right, we represent the process. And then under each of those sub-process areas, we identify here's all the capabilities that we're trying to demonstrate. While we're scoping and planning our project, it's a good exercise for the team to visually see how the work is going to get done. We also can prioritize some of those capabilities. Maybe some of these capabilities for a purchase order are nice to have, or maybe they're not quite as high of a business priority. So if you go to the next slide, which is slide 17, you can really start to see how your prioritization comes to play. And so as we look at this example, this project has decided that it's most important for us to get the core capability in the first release. So everything that has to work in order for us to go live is going to be in the first release. And we're going to make sure it works from beginning to end. The second release is going to be the next series of capability based on priority. And then the third release is a bunch of nice-to-have stuff. So maybe we'll never get to it because we're going to have other things to do, production support, new projects. But it's still on the backlog. It's still there. If we can have the capacity to deliver it, we'll deliver it. And so very quickly, we're able to visualize how our product is going to be delivered to our customers. The next slide on slide 18 is just some examples that I've done with some of my customers. And so you can see where we start to decompose work. Processing sales orders. When we process sales orders, there's 5 or 6 different things we have to do. Maybe there's different types of sales orders. Maybe there's a lot of configuration steps. Maybe there's master data steps. So really, this becomes the guide for the team as to how we're going to get all that work done. From there, we create our backlog. And that becomes the actual tactical list that we use to execute the work. Slide 19. So now what I'd like to do is talk about 2 projects in particular that we've done where the customer has been able to introduce the concepts of Lean and Agile, 2 very different types of projects, but also have immediate results. And I think really that's the key benefit here is how do we get customers to start to realize results. And so slide 20 introduces the concept for one of our customers where they were a 10-year SAP customer. They had full-blown SAP applications and already in production, financials, procurement, supply chain, HR payroll. They were actively engaged in a production support team, so they managed not only production support tickets, but they did change requests. They did ongoing projects. They also did upgrades. But we helped them with kind of creating this proof of concept. They were in a situation where they were behind schedule on a required project. They had to go live. They had 25,000 users, I think it was, that needed to go live in a very short period of time. They said our current process is not going to work. Every cycle that we go through, every week, we become another week or 2 behind schedule, so we'll never make it on time. We need to do it differently. So if we go to slide 21, this is what we did. We started to identify all the work. We had a backlog that was managed in an Excel spreadsheet. We had all of our stories. We identified the work that was going to be done in release 1. We created a Scrum board. So what you see here is a Scrum board. The work is managed from left to right. All the blue stickies represent the story of the work that's going to be delivered, and the yellow stickies represent tasks or activities that have to happen in order to claim success on those stories. And so everything that's working in that sprint is in the sprint backlog. So folks on the team are pulling those things forward. As it moves from left to right, we go into the work in progress. So the team, we can very quickly see who's working on what. How many items are we on? Early on in the sprint, this may be what your sprint looks like, but I hope by the end of the sprint, there's not too much in your sprint backlog and things are more on the right-hand side of the board in the done column. But it's a visual approach. Everybody can see where everybody is. Everybody knows what the scope is. It's easy to communicate to your stakeholders your status, and it doesn't take hardly any time to manage. We're not filling out status reports. We're not managing a 5,000-line project plan with percentage completes. Very quickly, we know exactly where we are. On the next slide, 22. For this project, we actually ended up finishing the project 1 week ahead of schedule. The other really cool thing is that when teams start to introduce these concepts, they start to increase their productivity. And for this team, we basically doubled their capacity. So we had a 200% increase in productivity and efficiency. So they got twice as much work done than they used to get done. A lot of people ask me, hey, Jason, what about scope creep? Isn't this, with a flexible backlog, something where we have scope creep? In this specific project, we measured exactly how many things we added to our backlog, new requirements. We also measured how many things we took off, and we came out almost break even. What does that mean? That means that we engaged the customer every few weeks. We got feedback. The customer told us what they wanted. They changed what they thought they needed when we came up with the original list. Now that they're seeing the system, now they see how it operates. Now they're seeing how these capabilities are coming together. They're saying, wow, okay, that's great. I don't need those other things. Let's take that off the list, or it becomes a lower priority. So at the end of the day, the scope hopefully if we manage it correctly, is not going to be a significant increase. But the key thing is the customer gets the product that they need to operate their business. With this team also, we were able to get the customer engaged. We were able to do value-added work. And really it's about transforming your team to be lean thinkers. It's about how do we think about our work differently. It's about minimizing non-value-add work and really focused on those time boxes. And if your time box is only 2 weeks, how am I going to get all this work done in 2 weeks? And that's really the key challenge, and it's also the key benefit. And that's where we get our productivity as well as our quality increases. Next slide is just a bunch of testimonials, and a couple of the key ones are in here. Is what used to take me 3 weeks to get done, I can now get done much quicker. And so our stakeholders are more involved. We get issues resolved quicker. We get decisions made faster. And the product of the quality of the product is higher, so we get higher customer satisfaction. On slide 24, it's a picture of our team. They're co-located. They're working together. They were communicating. Business and IT were sitting in the same location. See the scrum board in the back. Visual, transparency, communication. It's all important. On slide 25. Next case study is a consumer products organization. They've been on SAP for 12 years. Again, full suite of applications, financial, supply chain, manufacturing, warehouse management. And they had a baseline solution that they were going to deploy to all their European countries. New to Agile, though. They had not used Agile before, and so we created a pilot on how to do that. We focused on continuous improvement as the way that we were going to manage this, and so we wanted to make sure we ingrained that in our team members. We created a framework that was going to work for them on an enterprise level as well as on the project level. So we had 170 team members on 13 work streams using both Agile and Kanban. So we were able to combine both Agile and Kanban. Slide 26 is an example of some of the story mapping exercises that we did. So helping the team start to collaborate and figure out this is what we need to get done. How do we break down each of those processes into sub-processes. How do we break those sub-processes into discrete objects of work? How do we force that conversation with our team members? Where do we have dependencies? Where do we have rights of development objects? Where do we have gaps that we have to have a conversation around? What's the business process re-engineering effort, or maybe the development effort? On slide 27, we had to come up with a team structure that was not, we had to streamline a lot of different layers. So what you see is basically the project team is in the bottom box, and those are the people who are actually doing the work. And we protect them from all of the other ceremonies or other meetings that happen. And so we had to make sure that we had the right representation from both business and IT, which was critical for this team. So we needed to make sure that everybody was talking and everybody was working together. We had individual product teams with Scrum Masters and product owners, and we had a PMO that basically managed the administrative part of the project. But the product teams were the ones that were managing using Agile and using Kanban. Next slide is slide 28. We had core teams, which were the core functional teams, and those core functional teams were the primary areas of SAP. They were based on the functionality that we wanted to deliver. We also did have some support teams. These are teams that maybe were part-time or had their work was dependent on the functional teams. They worked more in a Kanban style. So they managed their work in an ongoing, living, breathing backlog that was based on dependencies, that was based on deadline dates of the functional teams, and they worked in a Kanban style. Slide 29, it's pretty complex and complicated, and but there's a lot of different coordinating events. So my point in showing this is that there's a lot of different events that are happening. You have to coordinate. And so one of the most important things, and a lot of people ask me is, well, Jason, if we're working in these teams, how do we communicate across teams? There's an event called a Scrum of Scrums, or at the integration layer. We have representation from all of the teams. We have a conversation at least once, if not twice a week. How's your team doing? What are you guys working on? What issues do you have? Are there any dependencies of team members? Do you need any of my team members to participate in what you're doing? How do we plan that? How do we identify those dependencies and communicate that? So we do that during our weekly scrums. I'm on slide 30. For this particular project, some of the key benefits were they were able to fully see the full vision. And a lot of times, the entire team doesn't get to understand that. And so the visualization of work is important. When you have a large team like this, you need to manage and keep everybody on the same page. And so if you have everybody aligned in the sprints, you have everybody aligned to the same vision, you're able to do that. Prioritizing scope, a lot of folks had said that a lot of times we deliver work that really we never used, or we spent a lot of time in the blueprint defining things that really weren't important to the business, or we spent too much time on the blueprint and we didn't spend enough time building and testing. And so really we got to focus on the quality of the product, we got to focus on that testing, we got to focus on bringing IT and business together. I know a lot of organizations have an IT organization and a business part of their operations, and it's hard for everybody to work together. So you have to overcome that, create the joint teams, and create the communication. So we're able to streamline testing, collaborate, and in the end, the product is better, the customer is happier. All right, I'm on slide 31 now. And basically, SAP, I've been working with SAP over the past few years, and they've been introducing the Lean and Agile concepts into their methodology of ASAP. And so for those of you who use ASAP, if you go out to Service Marketplace, you can access the ASAP 8. So version 8 is for the Agile projects. There is a version that has Agile in it. And if you go into each of the different areas of the ASAP methodology, you have the capability to drill down. You have the capability to get access to different templates, different deliverables. As you can see on this slide, there are some templates there for a backlog and for how do we manage our Scrum meetings and some guidelines. And so SAP has worked very hard and diligently to update all of these artifacts with the capability to deliver your project using Agile. And then if you go to the next slide, which is slide 32, SAP Activate has just recently been released. And so SAP is in the process of phasing out ASAP. And so the reason I introduced ASAP is because some of you may use it, and there's updates and there's Agile components to it. But as of, I believe, July of this year, SAP is no longer going to be updating ASAP. What they're going to be doing is now focusing on developing their new methodology, which they just released, called SAP Activate. And this is SAP Activate. And SAP Activate is based on the concepts of Lean and Agile. And so as we look at a phased approach, we look at some of the key activities that we do, we're trying to accelerate that delivery. We're trying to introduce the concept of prototyping, lean blueprinting, and trying to get all of those requirements prototyped as quickly as possible. We're currently working with SAP right now in a capability called value prototyping. How can we quickly envision the end product and prototype that as quickly as possible? And so we're working on projects right now where we're able to, in several weeks, take the requirements and convert those into a working prototype. Some SAP customers use RDSs, or rapid deployment solutions. So our partners and SAP have developed these RDSs that we can leverage as well to accelerate that prototyping. And so really, how do we jumpstart the project if there's any pre-assembly that we can leverage? How do we then validate our requirements? We can do this using Agile and Scrum. Realization is the building. Hopefully our prototype accelerates that building, and then we deploy. So this is the new way that SAP is going to be deploying methodology through SAP Activate. You can request access to this right now, I believe, on SAP's JAM site. So if you go through Service Marketplace and just search on SAP Activate, I think there's a link there that you can then shoot off a request to get access to SAP Activate. The next slide is slide 33, which is basically, once you get inside of Activate, there's a series of workshops that it promotes, and it's based on the concepts of Lean. It's based on the concepts of your backlog. It's based on how do we prioritize our work, and how do we focus on accelerating the delivery of that work. So, slide 34, I'm going to wrap this up and then open up for questions. How do we get started? I think we have to have some open and honest conversations with our business and our IT. We need to kind of look at do a readiness assessment. How are we ready for this? Are we ready to commit and accept some of these types of concepts? Do we have an executive champion? Is there somebody that's going to sponsor us and support this? Are we going to invest in training? Are we going to invest in bringing in people who have done this before? This is all about a journey. It's not that we're going to get it right the first time, but if the organization is committed to the concepts of Lean, the concepts of Agile, then we'll have the capability to introduce those into our projects. Select a good first project. Make it small. Don't make it big. Make it small so that we can start to test this out within our culture. Let's train the team. Let's make sure we have them all up to speed. Make sure we have product owners that are the right people that can commit to the business. They can represent the business. They can help make good business decisions and make them quickly. Now on slide 35. So in thinking about using Lean and Agile, think about your culture. Think about your organization. Are you able to have clear requirements? Can we estimate the effort? Do we have a lot of interfaces? Is it really complex? Is it something that we can do in time boxes? Do we have a lot of regulatory compliance? How about our sponsors? Are they committed? Are they investing in their team members? Do they have time to provide feedback every 3 weeks? Do we have team members that we can dedicate to the project? Can we forecast their capacity? When we say dedicated, does that really mean dedicated? What's our knowledge of the solution we're delivering? Do we have a good knowledge of it? Do we have consultants that can help us with that? Are we able to collaborate? Are we able to co-locate? How are we going to work together as a team? And how are we going to manage testing? And is there an Agile awareness or adoption or acceptance within our organization? Are we already using Lean in other places of our business? If we can say yes to a lot of these things, then maybe we're ready for Agile. Maybe we can start thinking about this. So a lot of people say also, how do we get started? And I think the conceptual design of what you're trying to deliver is important. I know SAP, as well as we do a lot of design thinking with our clients. We try to visualize the work. We try to visualize the product that's being delivered. We turn that into actionable work by using backlogs and Scrum, and then we deliver it. And so it's important for us to make sure everybody has a vision, everybody has a plan, everybody's clear about what we're delivering, and it's a priority to the business. And that's what's going to drive the quality and the value. Slide 37, basically, if we can start to integrate our value prototyping and our design thinking and our innovation, now we can execute that using an iterative delivery cycle. We want to get that continuous improvement. We want to get that feedback. So we'll implement using Agile. So in wrapping this up, I just want to make sure, as you think about your next project and you think about introducing concepts of Lean and Agile, identify the right product owners and stakeholders. Make sure we focus on teamwork. It's about communication, about cross-team members and collaboration. Build a good backlog. Make sure we have a good list. Spend that time doing story mapping. Let's make sure we all agree on what the rules of engagement are and how we're going to work together. We'll be able to find a couple metrics that we can manage the team, manage the budget, manage our progress, communicate with our stakeholders. I'm on slide 39. Take a few seconds up front to make sure we have an honest conversation. Is our culture ready for this? What do we have to change? Where are some of our risks? What do we have to look at? Also, this is a process. So the first time you do it, it's not going to be perfect, but maybe the second time and the third time we improve. We get better. Select a good first project with a good stakeholder, a good champion, team members that know the solution, and then let's focus on how we can get that to be a better product and deliver it faster. Make sure we invest in training as well. Slide 40. Life is a continuous journey of transformation. So if we want something to change, we have to do something different, right? So with that, I know we are at 6 minutes left. I'd like to open it up to questions, if we can at this time.
All right. Thank you so much, Jason. If anyone does have a question, please put it into the Q&A window. Again, if you have a question, please put it into the Q&A box.
All right, so I see that there's one question right now that says, where in the process do you complete? Okay, that's okay. The question says, where in the process do you complete project-related documentation like functional specifications? It's a great question. One of the things that we specifically look at when we're planning these projects is, what's the documentation? Right now, we probably might feel our documentation is pretty heavy. We have to make sure we consider what our audit requirements are, our SOX compliance. If we're in a regulated environment, what are our requirements for that? But functional specifications would be a story, right? It's a story that we have to define. It's work that somebody has to do. During one of our sprints, the team has to say, I need to write a functional spec. That becomes a story. We estimated that it's going to take X number of hours. And these people are going to be working on it. So during the sprint, it's done. But we might have dependent stories. So maybe there's a technical specification that comes from that. Maybe we have the opportunity to streamline all that documentation into one document. And maybe we can just look at the information that's actually needed. I know a lot of places we go to, a lot of projects I've been on, there's a lot of over-documentation, and 50% of it's never used. So how do we streamline that? So some places streamline it and are able to get it down to very light documentation, because the team members are sitting next to each other, so we don't have to worry about communication issues or timing issues or things like that. So I think we have to look at the situation, look at the culture, look at the requirements and compliance requirements and try to figure out how to make that work in our environment. Have you seen any customers applying these techniques to OCC projects? Can I have a clarification on OCC? I don't know what that means. I'll go to the next one. Co-location is a love-hate topic for me on global implementations. How do we balance giving up home life for a project implementation at a delivery site? I saw collaboration over co-location as a bullet, and I agree with that. I've had many projects where we've been able to successfully collaborate and work as teams, and people were not co-located. I think it's a fact of life that we're dealing with global organizations. We're dealing with offshore teams. We're dealing with people that are located in multiple locations. So there's many different ways for us to do that. How do we communicate and collaborate? There's great tools, Skype, WebEx, video chat. There's other software that helps us create basically a virtual office, and we knock on each other's door when we're in, or when we know that they're not at their desk and they're not available, they're out. And so there's ways for us to organize meetings. Maybe this week we're doing our daily scrums at 8 a.m., and that means that some people have to get up at or be on the call at 2 in the morning. But next week we're changing it so the other team members, and we have to figure out how to work together the best we can. We have to figure out how to manage the time zones, manage the cultural differences. It can be done. It's been done very successfully. But yes, I agree with you. It's more of a reality that we've got distributed teams these days. Early in their presentation, you discussed a report out at the end of a scrum that included groups like compliance. How do you avoid derailers coming up at the end of the scrum? How do you ensure that this feedback is received before or during the scrum? We always want to make sure we include everybody during the scrum as far as getting their input. So if we know that it's important for internal audit to be a part and they have a very significant role in accepting work, then let's put them on the project team. Let's give them a role, and let's make sure that they're aware of everything that's going on and we're getting their questions answered during the scrum. We don't want there to be any surprises. So you're exactly right. We don't want derailers. So how do we mitigate that risk, and how do we get those people engaged up front, early, often? Absolutely. Bring them on. Let's talk to them. Let's maybe during the sprint we have 1 or 2 sidebar prep meetings with our internal audit, just as an example. Run SAP like a factory and operations control center, OCC. Got it. Thank you. There's a lot of organizations right now that are having that same conversation. And when we talk about how do we integrate this kind of concept into production support, how do we do an OpEx kind of environment from a lean perspective, how do we look at this from a configuration and change control perspective? So how do we integrate all of this? When you look at all of this coming together, it's really looking at it at the portfolio management level and the release level. And so I want to change my organization to be operating in a way that we've got the work identified, it's coming through the backlogs, it's being prioritized, and it's being assigned to the team members, and everybody's working in a cadence that allows us to operate like a factory, right? And so we've got operations, we have our metrics, we have the ability to measure our effectiveness, we have the ability to measure our productivity, we have the ability to measure our quality. And so by looking at how we're working as a team, we're able to continuously improve on how that's working. Any other questions? I think I got them all answered.
We'll give it like another
Excellent.
minute to see if anyone answers any questions. Please type them into the Q&A box if you have any. Okay, well, I think this will conclude our work. I think this will conclude our webcast. On behalf of ASUG's Chicago office, I'd like to thank our speaker and the Solution Manager community for hosting this event, and thank you all for your participation today. As mentioned earlier, the slides and recording link will be emailed to you and will also be accessible on asug.com. Have a great rest of your day.